On a quiet winter night in 1950, the silence in Columbia, Missouri, was absolute, until a single phone call shattered the peace of a young girl's evening. It was a call that would become one of the most terrifying legends in American history. Have you checked the children? What Janett Christman didn't know was that the calls might be coming from inside the house. Columbia was a town where people didn't lock their doors, a place where everyone knew their neighbors. But that evening, the air felt different, heavier, more expectant. Janett Christman was only 13. She arrived at the Romack home for a routine evening of babysitting. The parents left for a party, leaving the young girl in charge of their toddler. The house was hers for the night. At first, everything was normal. Janett settled into the chair, the house settling around her with small, rhythmic creaks. She hadn't been alone for long when the telephone rang for the first time, a sharp, violent sound in the quiet house. Janett picked up the receiver, expecting a message from the parents or a friend. But there was only silence, and then the sound of slow, ragged breathing, a stranger's breath, close and intimate. She hung up, her heart racing. A prank, she told herself. Just a bored teenager with nothing better to do. But the silence that followed felt different. It felt like someone was listening, waiting. 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. This time there was a voice, whispered and distorted. "Have you checked the children?" Janett froze. How did they know she was babysitting? How did they know she was alone? She checked the locks. She checked the toddler. Everything seemed secure, but the fear had taken root. She started to see things in the shadows, a movement in the garden, a flicker in the hallway mirror. The third call was the breaking point. The voice was clearer now, more confident. "I'm watching you," it said. Terrified, Janett called the police. She begged them to help her, to find out who was doing this. The officers told her to stay calm. They would trace the next call. They would find him. When the phone rang once more, it wasn't the stranger. It was the police dispatcher. Her voice was trembling. "Get out of the house immediately, Janett. The calls are coming from the upstairs extension." The police arrived within minutes, but for Janett Christman, it was already too late. When the parents returned, they found a scene that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Janett had been murdered. The killer had vanished into the night. Despite a massive investigation, no one was ever charged. The case remains unsolved. But the horror of that night lived on, evolving into the legend of the babysitter and the man upstairs. To understand the impact of this case, we have to look back at Columbia in 1950. It was a town of 25,000 people. It was a time when the biggest worry was the weather or the price of grain. Crime was something that happened elsewhere. Janett was a popular student, an 8th grader who loved music and her friends. She had no enemies, no reason to fear. The Romacks were friends of her family. They trusted Janett implicitly. It was supposed to be a safe, quiet job. When the police arrived, they were met with a baffling scene. There was no sign of forced entry. The doors were still locked. But one detail stood out. An upstairs window was slightly ajar, a window that led to a small roof above the porch. Police focused on a local man, a neighbor who had shown an unusual interest in Janett, but evidence was thin. He took a lie detector test, a new technology at the time. The results were inconclusive. He was never charged. For months, Colombia was a city under siege. Parents wouldn't leave their children. The phone became a source of terror. But how did this real-life tragedy become the urban legend we know today? It started with the storytelling. In the 1960s, the story began to change. Details were added. The upstairs extension became the centerpiece of the horror. In 1974, the movie Black Christmas brought the calls from inside the house trope to the silver screen. The legend was solidified. Then came When a Stranger Calls. The line, "We've traced the call. It's coming from inside the house," became a cultural touchstone. But behind the Hollywood scares was the memory of a 13-year-old girl in Missouri who didn't have a script to follow. Janett's case was never officially closed. The files sit in a dusty archive, the pages yellowed by time and frustration. Over the years, new detectives have looked at the evidence. They've tested the DNA that didn't exist in 1950, but the trail is cold. The killer, if he is still alive, would be in his 90s now, carrying the secret of that snowy night in Missouri. The Romack house still stands, a quiet reminder of a tragedy that changed a community forever, a house that remembers. We live in an age of constant connection. Our phones are always in our hands. We think we are never alone. But the fear that Janett Christman felt is still there. The fear that the technology we trust can be used against us. The legend survives because it touches something primal, the invasion of our most private spaces, the home, the bedroom. It reminds us that the monster isn't always outside. Sometimes he is already inside, waiting for the sun to go down. So, the next time your phone rings in the middle of the night, think of Janett Christman. Think of the snowy night in 1950. Think of the caller who didn't want money, who didn't want fame, who only wanted to ask one question. Janett's story is a tragedy, a mystery, and a warning that has echoed through the decades. A warning we still haven't heeded. The killer took her life, but the story took her name and turned it into a nightmare for every generation that followed. The case was never solved, but the legend of the babysitter and the man upstairs will never die. It is part of us now, and somewhere, in the dark, the phone is still ringing, waiting for someone to pick up, waiting for the silence to break. Have you checked the children?